The veterans' warning, the crystalline towers of Zephyrian High Command, pierced the purple sky of Nexus Prime like frozen lightning. Within the highest spire, the War Council gathered in their traditional semicircle, each member representing a different species of the mighty galactic coalition. The chamber hummed with the quiet confidence of beings who had never known true defeat. General Crix Valdorian stood apart from the others, his scaled hide bearing the pale scars of old battles, where his fellow commanders wore polished armor that gleamed under the artificial suns. Valdorian's gear was practical, worn, marked by real combat. His 6 eyes, once bright amber, had dulled to the color of old brass. The other generals saw him as a relic, a living reminder of conflicts they preferred to forget. Supreme Admiral Nexus Koroth dominated the center of the room, his massive frame encased in ceremonial armor that had never seen battle. The Vorthok leader's voice boomed across the chamber as he gestured toward the holographic star map floating above them. The expansion into Sector 7 will proceed as planned, Koroth declared, his clawed finger tracing a path through dozens of star systems. These human colonies represent the last obstacle to our complete dominance of this spiral arm. Commander Yara Desik, young and eager for glory, leaned forward in her chair. Her species, the Kelthani, were known for their tactical brilliance, but Desik had never faced an enemy that didn't follow standard military doctrine. The preliminary scans show primitive technology, she said, her voice sharp with excitement. Kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, chemical propulsion. We could take all 3 colonies with a single battle group. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. General Valdorian remained silent, but his expression grew darker with each word. Their fleet consists mainly of converted cargo vessels and mining ships, another commander added with obvious disdain. They don't even have proper military academies. How could such a disorganized species pose any threat to the coalition? Because Valdorian's voice cut through the room like a blade. You have never fought them. The chamber fell silent. Koroth's massive head turned toward the old general, eyes narrowing. General Valdorian, your concerns about the human colonies have been noted and dismissed. We will not delay our expansion because of your anxiety about facing an inferior species. Valdorian stepped forward, his movements careful and deliberate. 15 years ago, you sent me to establish a forward base at Kepler Station. It was supposed to be a simple operation. Secure the station, eliminate any resistance, prepare for the main fleet's arrival. He paused, his voice growing quieter but more intense. I commanded 12 ships and 8,000 soldiers. We were the finest warriors the coalition had ever assembled. Yes, and you completed your mission, Korath interrupted impatiently. The station was secured. At what cost? Valdorian's eyes blazed. Do you remember what I reported? Do any of you recall the casualty figures? Commander Vesik shifted uncomfortably. She had read the reports, but the numbers seemed impossible. The records show significant losses, but surely 7,436 dead. Valdorian said each word like a funeral toll. 11 ships destroyed or damaged beyond repair, and that was from defending a single mining station with a population of 3,000 humans. The room erupted in skeptical murmurs. The reports must have been exaggerated, someone said. Equipment failures, perhaps, or I wish they were. Valdorian's voice carried the weight of old nightmares. But I was there. I saw what they did to us. He activated his personal holoprojector, and suddenly the war room was filled with the smoking ruins of Kepler Station. The assembled commanders fell silent as they watched scenes of devastation that seemed impossible. We arrived expecting surrender, or token resistance, Valdorian continued, his voice steady despite the horror playing out in the projections. The humans had 12 hours to evacuate, 12 hours to run. Do you know what they did instead? The images shifted to show twisted metal corridors, improvised barricades, and weapon emplacements built from mining equipment. They stayed, every single one of them, and they turned their home into a fortress. Commander Vesic studied the tactical display with growing unease. But their weapons were primitive. How could they, primitive? Valdorian's laugh was bitter. They took our own plasma charges and turned them into shaped explosive devices. They hacked our communication systems and used our own tactical frequencies to coordinate ambushes. When we cut their power, they rerouted geothermal energy from the planet's core through the station's infrastructure. The hologram showed coalition, soldiers, elite warriors, trained from birth, falling back in confusion as human defenders emerged from ventilation shafts, maintenance tunnels, and spaces too small for armored troops to follow. They didn't fight fair, another general protested. These were terrorist tactics, not military. They fought to survive. Valdorian cut him off. And when you're fighting for survival, there are no rules. Watch this. The display showed human defenders using the station's artificial gravity generators as weapons, creating zones of crushing force that disabled coalition-powered armor. They weaponized life support systems, flooding corridors with toxic gases that their own protective equipment could filter, but coalition breathing apparatus could not handle. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Valdorian said, highlighting a slight woman with graying hair who appeared to be coordinating the defense. Station administrator and xenobotanist. She had no military training, but she understood that station better than anyone. She turned every system, every corridor, every room into a trap. The assembled commanders watched in growing horror as the human defenders demonstrated an adaptability that defied all military logic. When their weapons were destroyed, they built new ones from industrial equipment. When their positions were overrun, they collapsed entire sections of the station rather than allow coalition forces to advance. But surely, once you broke their main defense lines, Vesic began. There were no main defense lines, Valdorian said quietly. Every human was a soldier. The doctor who tried to treat our wounded during a temporary ceasefire. She was the same person who had been building explosive devices from medical supplies. The maintenance worker who offered to guide us through the tunnels. He led an entire platoon into a section where they were buried alive when he triggered controlled cave-ins. The hologram showed the final assault on the station's command center. Coalition forces, their numbers depleted and morale shattered, finally broke through the last barriers. But instead of finding cowering survivors, they discovered something that would haunt Valdorian forever. Dr. Rodriguez and the remaining defenders were waiting for us, he said. They had rigged the station's fusion reactor to overload. She stood there, her hand on the detonation switch, and do you know what she said? The room was completely silent. Now, even Korath leaned forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by uncomfortable attention. She said, "You can have our home, but you'll never have our spirit. And now you know what it costs to fight humans." Valdorian's voice cracked slightly. Then she looked at me, specifically at me, and said, "Tell your leaders, tell them what it means to push us too far." But she didn't trigger the overload. Vesic said, "The station wasn't destroyed." "No," Valdorian agreed, "because I promised her that I would deliver her message. that I would warn the Coalition about what humanity was capable of. She let us take the station, but only after we agreed to leave the civilian areas intact and allow the survivors to evacuate safely. He turned off the projector, and the chamber was plunged back into the cold light of the artificial suns. They kept their word. Every promise they made, they honored. And in return, I kept mine. I have spent 15 years trying to warn the Coalition about the mistake we would make if we underestimated humanity. Supreme Admiral Korath stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the room. General Baldorian, I understand that your experience at Kepler Station was ... traumatic, but you cannot expect the Coalition to abandon its expansion based on a single engagement with desperate colonists. They weren't desperate, Valdorian said firmly. They were determined. There's a difference. Desperate beings make mistakes, take unnecessary risks, fight without thinking. These humans planned every move, calculated every loss, accepted every sacrifice as part of a larger strategy. A strategy that failed, Korath pointed out. You said yourself that you took the station. We took a hollowed-out shell filled with corpses and rubble, Valdorian replied, and we paid a price that should have warned us away from human space. Forever. But instead of learning, we classified the reports and pretended it never happened. Commander Desek accessed her personal datapad, reviewing the intelligence reports on the 3 target colonies. The current colonies are much larger than Kepler Station, she said slowly. Populations in the hundreds of thousands, established infrastructure, defensive installations, which means they've had years to prepare, Valdorian said. Years to study our tactics, our technology, our weaknesses. Do you think they've been idle since Kepler Station? He activated the star map again, highlighting the 3 target systems. New Geneva. Population 400,000. Primary industries, advanced manufacturing and technological research. Military assets, officially classified as minimal defensive capabilities. Exactly, Korath said, triumphantly. Manufacturing colonies have no military manufacturing colonies that specialize in advanced technology, Valdorian corrected. Do you know what kind of weapons you can build in facilities designed to construct starship components and quantum processors? The second target appeared on the map. Port Coronado, population 200,000. Primary industries, asteroid, mining and resource extraction, military assets, patrol boats and cargo escorts. Miners, Desek said dismissively. What threat could they pose? Miners who spend their lives working in vacuum, handling explosives, operating in environments that would kill most species in minutes, Valdorian replied. Miners who know how to move through space without being detected, who understand structural engineering well enough to collapse entire asteroid fields. The third target glowed ominously on the display. Haven Colony. Population 600,000. Primary industries, agriculture and biological research. Military assets, none listed. Scientists and farmers, Korath scoffed. Surely, even. You cannot claim that gardeners pose a threat to the Coalition fleet. Scientists who understand biological warfare better than our own military researchers, Valdorian said grimly. Farmers who know how to survive in hostile environments, who work with dangerous organisms and toxic chemicals every day, and all of them living in closed ecological systems that they understand completely. He turned to face the assembled commanders. Directly, you see 3 easy targets. I see 3 fortresses, each filled with highly intelligent, resourceful, and determined defenders who have spent 15 years preparing for exactly this kind of attack. Enough, Korath's voice boomed. Through the chamber, I will not allow paranoid speculation to delay our expansion. The decision has been made. Admiral Vesek will command the first battle group, Admiral Renth the second, and Admiral Kalvar the third. Each group will consist of 50 ships and will strike simultaneously, to prevent any coordination between the colonies. You're making a mistake, Valdorian said quietly. The same mistake we made at Kepler Station, but on a scale that will cost thousands of lives. The only mistake, Korath replied coldly, would be allowing the fear of an inferior species to paralyze the coalition. You are dismissed, General Valdorian. Your concerns have been noted. As the other commanders began discussing tactical details and resource allocation, Valdorian made one final attempt. At least allow me to accompany one of the battle groups. Let me show the fleet commanders what they're really facing. Korath considered this for a moment. Very well. You may observe Admiral Desek's attack on New Geneva. Perhaps witnessing a proper military operation will cure you of your excessive caution. Valdorian nodded grimly. He knew it was already too late to change their minds, but perhaps he could minimize the disaster that was about to unfold. As he left the chamber, he sent a coded message through channels that officially didn't exist, warning contacts in human space that the storm was coming. 3 days later, as the coalition fleets prepared to depart for human space, intercepted transmissions began reaching the target colonies. The messages were brief and cryptic, but their meaning was clear to those who knew how to listen. On New Geneva, Dr. James Chen looked up from his research terminal as the priority alert flashed across his screen. The astrophysicist had been studying coalition ship movements for months, and the pattern was unmistakable. Alina, he called to his assistant, Dr. Alina Vasquez, who was reviewing the colony's defensive capabilities. They're coming. 3 battle groups, 50 ships each, simultaneous strikes. Elena Vasquez. No relation to the Elena Rodriguez, who had died at Kepler Station, but inspired by her sacrifice, nodded grimly. How long do we have? 72 hours, maybe less. She activated the colony-wide emergency system. This is Colony Defense Coordinator Vasquez. All department heads report to the command center immediately. Authorization, Kepler Set 7. The authorization code sent a chill through everyone who heard it. It meant the same thing it had meant 15 years ago at a small mining station. That had held off the entire coalition fleet. We will not surrender. We will not run. We will fight. And this time, they would be ready. The price of ignorance, the coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm front. Their ships arranged in perfect formation against the starfield. Admiral Vesek stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. New Geneva hung before them like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. 72 ships, perfectly positioned, she murmured to her tactical officer. The humans don't even seem to be aware of our presence. General Valdorian, relegated to an observer's position at the rear of the bridge, studied the same display with growing unease. Their civilian traffic is still moving normally, he said. No evacuation ships, no emergency broadcasts. Either they haven't detected us, or ... or they're simply accepting the inevitable. Desek finished confidently. Sometimes inferior species recognize when resistance is futile. But Valdorian knew better. He had seen this before, the deceptive calm that preceded a hurricane. Admiral, I strongly recommend a cautious approach. Send reconnaissance drones first, Scan for defensive emplacements, General. With respect, you are here to observe, not to command. Vesik cut him off. She turned to her communications officer. Send. The surrender demand. Standard coalition protocol. The message broadcast across all frequencies. This is Admiral Desik of the Galactic Coalition Fleet. The colony of New Geneva is now under coalition jurisdiction. Surrender your defensive systems and prepare for occupation. You have 1 hour. To comply, the response came back immediately, but it wasn't from the colony's government. Instead, a middle-aged human woman appeared on the main screen, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the chaos that should have been erupting across the colony. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Colony Defense Coordinator. She said simply, "We decline. Your generous offer," Desik laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Dr. Vasquez, you seem to misunderstand. This was not an offer. It was a demand. Surrender now, or face the consequences." "We understand perfectly," Vasquez replied. "We also understand the consequences. The question is, do you?" The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in confused silence. Desik turned to her tactical officer. "Begin the bombardment. Target their defensive installations first, then their power generation facilities." "Admiral," the tactical officer said uncertainly, "our scans show no significant defensive installations. A few orbital platforms, some basic shield generators around the major cities, but nothing that could threaten our fleet." "Then target their industrial complexes," Desik ordered. "Cripple their manufacturing capability." The first wave of plasma torpedoes streaked toward the planet's surface. They impacted exactly where the targeting computers predicted, sending pillars of fire into the sky. But instead of the expected secondary explosions and collapsing infrastructure, something else happened. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, his voice tight with confusion. "The industrial complexes are ... changing." On the main screen, the manufacturing plants that had been producing civilian goods moments before were rapidly reconfiguring themselves. Automated systems deployed hidden armor plating, weapon systems emerged from concealed positions, and what had appeared to be simple factories revealed themselves as heavily fortified defensive positions. "Impossible," Desik breathed. "How could they hide military installations from our scanners?" Valdorian stepped forward, his expression grim. "Because they didn't hide military installations," he said. "They built facilities that could become military installations when needed. Every factory, every power plant, every research laboratory on that planet was designed with dual purposes." As if to prove his point, the colony's response began. What had appeared to be simple communication arrays suddenly swiveled to track the coalition ships. Energy readings spiked as industrial fusion reactors were diverted to power weapon systems. That shouldn't have existed. The first human attack was devastating in its precision. Instead of the crude kinetic weapons the coalition had expected, beams of coherent energy lanced out from the planet's surface. But these weren't standard military lasers. They were industrial cutting tools, designed for precision work on Starship. Hulls now weaponized and focused on the coalition fleet's most vulnerable systems. "Shields down on the Relentless," reported the tactical officer, his voice climbing with panic. "They're targeting our power conduits directly, somehow bypassing our defensive screens." "How is that possible?" Desik demanded. Valdorian was studying the tactical display with the eye of a veteran. "They're using industrial-grade equipment," he realized. "Those cutting beams are designed to slice through the same materials our ships are made from. Our shields are calibrated to stop military weapons, not precision tools. The second wave of the human attack was even more unexpected. Small, fast-moving objects began launching from the planet's surface. Too small to be traditional missiles, but moving with purpose toward the Coalition fleet. "What are those?" Desik asked. The answer came when the first of the objects reached the Coalition ships. They weren't weapons at all, but mining drones, reprogrammed and equipped with industrial explosives. They attached themselves to the hulls of Coalition vessels and began cutting through armor plating with tools designed for asteroid mining. "They're boarding us," the tactical officer reported in disbelief, "but not with soldiers. They're using automated mining equipment to cut into our ships." The Coalition fleet found itself under attack by an enemy that didn't follow any conventional military doctrine. Their weapons were designed to counter known threats, but the humans were using tools and tactics that had never been classified as military equipment. Meanwhile, aboard the Coalition ships that had been breached by the mining drones, chaos reigned. The drones weren't trying to capture the ships or engage in combat. Instead, they were systematically destroying critical systems, life support, navigation, communications, and power distribution. Each drone was essentially a single-use sabotage device, expendable and focused on maximum disruption. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving reports from the other battle groups. Port Coronado and Haven Colony are responding with similar tactics." Desik pulled up the tactical displays from the other theaters of operation. At Port Coronado, the asteroid miners had turned their entire industry into a weapon. Cargo ships filled with refined metals were being accelerated to tremendous speeds and launched like guided missiles at the Coalition fleet. The miners' knowledge of orbital mechanics and their experience with precision maneuvering in asteroid fields made them deadly opponents in space combat. Haven Colony was proving even more nightmarish. The agricultural scientists had weaponized their biological research, deploying engineered organisms that could survive in the vacuum of space and attack the organic components of Coalition ships. Entire vessels were being consumed by what appeared to be space-adapted bacteria that fed on the materials used in Coalition construction. "This is impossible," Desik said, staring at the reports. "These are civilians, not military forces." "No," Valdorian replied grimly, "these are humans, and we just declared war on the most adaptable species in the galaxy." The Coalition's response was to escalate, bringing their most powerful weapons to bear on the human colonies. Plasma bombardments turned sections of the planet's surfaces into molten glass. Orbital bombardment platforms fired kinetic weapons that created massive craters. For a brief moment, it seemed like the Coalition's superior firepower would prevail, but the humans had prepared for this as well, deep underground. In facilities that had been disguised as geological research stations, massive industrial complexes continued to operate. These weren't just bunkers. They were complete manufacturing ecosystems, capable of producing everything from basic tools to advanced technology. Dr. James Chen, working from a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath New Geneva's surface, coordinated the colony's defense with the calm precision of a scientist conducting an experiment. "Wave to manufacturing online," he reported to Alina Vasquez, "beginning production of Type 7 interceptors." The Type 7 interceptors were another example of human ingenuity under pressure. They weren't traditional spacecraft, but rather large-scale versions of the industrial fabricators used in asteroid mining. Each interceptor was essentially a mobile factory, capable of producing weapons, drones, or repair systems while in flight. As the Coalition fleet tried to maintain its bombardment of the planet's surface, these interceptors emerged from hidden launch sites and began a systematic campaign of attrition. They didn't engage the Coalition ships directly. Instead, they used their manufacturing capability to produce thousands of small, simple devices, sensor jammers, communication disruptors, navigation scramblers, and power drains. The Coalition fleet found itself fighting not just the human colonies, but the space around them. Their sensors were blinded by clouds of chaff that appeared to be self-replicating. Their communications were jammed by devices that seemed to learn and adapt to each attempt to restore contact. Their navigation systems were confused by false signals that led ships into collision courses with debris fields that hadn't existed moments before. "Admiral," the sensor operator reported, his voice strained, "we've lost contact with 12 ships. Not destroyed, just lost. We can't track them, can't communicate with them, can't even confirm their positions." Desic was beginning to understand the magnitude of her error, but her pride wouldn't allow her to admit it. "All ships, concentrate fire on the planet's major population centers. If we can't defeat their military assets, we'll force them to surrender by threatening their civilians." "Admiral, no." Valdorian stepped forward, his voice urgent. "That's exactly what they want you to do. At Kepler Station, when we threatened the civilian population, it didn't break their morale. It unified them. It made every single human on that station willing to die rather than surrender." But Desic had already given the order. The Coalition fleet's most powerful weapons turned toward New Geneva cities, preparing to deliver an ultimatum that would surely break the humans' resistance. The response was immediate and terrifying. Every human facility on the planet, from the smallest research station to the largest industrial complex, suddenly activated defensive systems that had been completely hidden from Coalition sensors. The planet's surface lit up with energy discharges as a planetary defense grid came online. But it wasn't just a defense grid. It was a weapon system of unprecedented scale and sophistication. The humans had turned their entire colony into a single, massive device designed for one purpose: to destroy any force that threatened their home. The energy discharge that erupted from New Geneva's surface was not a traditional beam weapon. It was a focused gravitational pulse generated by coordinating every fusion reactor, every industrial fabricator, and every research facility on the planet. The pulse struck the Coalition fleet like the hand of an angry god. Asterisk. Ships that had weathered plasma bombardments and kinetic strikes found their hulls crumpling under gravitational forces that exceeded their structural limits. The Coalition's most advanced shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and particle beams, were useless against an attack that manipulated the fundamental forces of space-time itself. "Retreat," Desic screamed, but it was too late. The gravitational pulse was followed by a second wave of smaller, more precise attacks. Each Coalition ship found itself targeted by beams that seemed to know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. With minimum energy expenditure, the retreat became a rout. Of the 50 ships that had attacked New Geneva, only 18 remained, functional enough to reach the hyperspace jump point. The others were either destroyed outright or left drifting in space. Their crews evacuated to the surviving vessels. Similar disasters were unfolding at Port Coronado and Haven Colony. The asteroid miners had turned their knowledge of orbital mechanics into a devastating weapon, using precisely calculated trajectories to destroy Coalition ships with chunks of rock accelerated to tremendous speeds. Haven Colony's biological weapons had not only destroyed most of the attacking fleet, but had also contaminated the survivors, forcing them to maintain strict quarantine protocols. Back at Zephyrian High Command, Supreme Admiral Koroth stared at the reports in disbelief. Of the 150 ships that had attacked the human colonies, fewer than 40 had returned. The casualties were catastrophic. Over 30,000 coalition personnel dead, wounded, or missing. How, he whispered. How did 3 primitive colonies destroy 3 battle groups? General Valdorian, who had survived the disaster at New Geneva, stood before the emergency session of the War Council. His expression was grim but not surprised. They didn't destroy us with superior technology or overwhelming numbers, he said quietly. They destroyed us with superior understanding. Understanding of what? Commander Desick asked. She had been rescued from her flagship's wreckage, but the experience had broken her confidence completely. Understanding of us, Valdorian replied. They studied our tactics, our technology, our psychology. They knew exactly how we would attack, and they prepared accordingly. But more than that, they understood something we forgot, which is the difference between fighting for conquest and fighting for survival. Valdorian activated the holographic display, showing the tactical analysis of the 3 battles. We fought to win. They fought to live. And when you're fighting to live, you'll use any weapon, any tactic, any sacrifice necessary to protect what you love. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The coalition had always prided itself on its military superiority, its advanced technology, its disciplined forces, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the human colonies. Dr. Alina Vasquez appeared on the main screen, her appearance unchanged from the beginning of the conflict. Behind her, the lights of New Geneva's cities glowed peacefully, as if the devastating battle had never occurred. Supreme Admiral Korath, she said simply, I believe General Valdorian delivered a message to you some time ago. A message from Kepler Station. Korath's massive frame seemed to shrink as he realized what she was referring to. The message was simple, Vasquez continued. Don't push us too far. You've now learned what happens when you ignore that warning. The question is, will you learn from this experience, or will you force us to teach you again? What, ... what do you want? Korath asked, his earlier arrogance completely gone. We want to be left alone, Vasquez replied. We want to build our colonies, raise our families, and explore the universe in peace. We have no desire for conquest or empire, but we will defend ourselves with everything we have, everything we are, and everything we can become. She paused, letting her words sink in. General Valdorian understands this. Perhaps it's time the rest of you did as well. The transmission ended, leaving the coalition leadership in stunned silence. Finally, Korath turned to Valdorian. General, you warned us. We should have listened. Valdorian nodded slowly. The humans have offered us a choice, he said. We can accept their terms and leave them in peace, or we can continue this war and face the consequences. But if we choose war, we need to understand what we're really fighting. And what is that? Not just 3 colonies, not just a single species, Valdorian replied. We're fighting an idea, the idea that any being, no matter how small or apparently weak, has the right to defend their home, their family, their way of life. And ideas, Admiral, are far more dangerous than any weapon. In the weeks that followed, the coalition withdrew from human space. A non-aggression pact was signed, establishing clear boundaries and communication protocols. The humans, true to Their word showed no interest in conquest or expansion beyond their established territories. But the message was clear throughout the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They had proven that intelligence, creativity, and determination could overcome even the most overwhelming odds. They had shown that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the desire to conquer, but from the need to protect what you love. And General Valdorian, finally vindicated after 15 years of warnings, was appointed as the Coalition's first ambassador to human space. His mission was simple: to ensure that the lessons learned at such a terrible cost would never be forgotten. The humans had taught the galaxy a lesson in the most effective way possible, by making the alternative too costly to contemplate. And in doing so, they had earned something far more valuable than victory. They had earned respect. Asterisk.